A typical kind of identity management deployment environment would look like this, particularly if you are doing it on-prem, and this is when you are using a JDBC database as your IDM repository is all at the bottom. So the IDM repository will need to be created in a database. Prepare the database by running SQL script to prepare the correct data structure needed by the IDM to store its configuration and its identity and the entities it is managing. And typically you would create a database cluster. There would be a load balancer between IDM instance and the database, so you don't have a single point of failure in the IDM repository layer, and also useful for high availability. You have at least two IDM instances on separate nodes, IDM cluster behind a load balancer, and that would be the basic architecture you will start with. If you are using a directory server as your IDM repository, then you will still have a load balancing in front of your IDM instance for that forming an IDM cluster. But the directory server instance will be in a master slave or an active passive kind of configuration. So one of the directory servers will be the active directory server, and the second one or the subsequent one will be passive, and they would be configured to replicate their data much like relational database would be in their own cluster. They have their own replication technology. If the primary year fails, then the IDM would be aware of whether the second one would automatically fail over to the second one, or vice versa. In fact, if the primary one doesn't fail, it will still be in operation. Because both IDM instances would typically use the primary one unless it failed and then would use the second one. That's why you got the alliance to the failover of the second directory service. For installing the IDM, strongly recommend you to take a look at the official document about the installation, and also the IDM in a cluster. It had a very detailed explanation about the setup. In the lab environment, this is the architecture we will end up creating. We will only have a single load balancer, and we will have two instances of IDM in a cluster. And we will have a single identity manager repository as a ForgeRock directory server. So we won't really put a full kind of configuration as shown in this slide, but it's kind of a starting point. There is an external directory server that we actually use a ForgeRock directory server for in this sharing environment. And this is to represent an external LDAP system that contains identity that are used by an application for subscriber of a entertainment company like a Netflix that provides streaming service. And we want to be able to synchronize the data in this subscriber database with our identity manager repository. So this is the identity manager repository. This is some external system is being used by another application. Then we need to synchronize the data. In this slide, it is a simplified view of the IDM instance architecture that related UIs that you should be aware of when working with IDM. In the lab environment, the first IDM instance is installed in this folder. IDM is start using the startup.sh script found in this folder in a terminal window on the Linux VM in the lab. The location of the folder is not important for the deployment of the IDM. The name of the folder represents the first subscriber's IDM instance, which is using an external DS instance as the IDM repository. And the IDM instance and IDM repository are configured for generic mapping. This will become clear throughout the course later. The internal IDM architecture contains a REST interface that the IDM admin UI and end user UI used to communicate with the IDM. The IDM admin UI is for IDM administrator, and the IDM end user UI is for all other end user. The REST interface is also used by other clients for various reasons that will be covered in later. Yeah. IDM contains a set of core service, modules, and frameworks that provide the identity management features. The IDM is based on the OSGI framework, which is provided by the Apache Felix, and runs within a Jetty Web Container Servlet deployed in a JVM. The OSGI framework contains an interface called the Felix console that is started automatically when IDM is started from the command line using the startup.sh script. Okay, so let's go to the lab environment. Let me open the project folder. So this is the folder directory which we mentioned in previous slide, and you will see the terminal in here. And now I will go for startup.sh. It takes a while. Okay, so now if I can press the enter, and you see it give me a command line prompts where I can say help, and this is the Felix console. This doesn't show use anything about the IDM and IDM configuration, but this is about the OSGI container. We can show things about the Java VM. So I could type like sys syspop. Okay, so we show me all the system properties, such as the user directory where I am running this IDM instance. You can see those folder in here, and where my IDM installation is. Another like this one, open IDM key store location. This probably is telling us where is the key store for open IDM for any certificate that it may use in the key store provider. So that is the Felix console. So the IDM is now running. If I want to shut down the IDM, I can just type shut down command here now. This is an interactive way of doing things. Typically, a production system, you won't do it in this way. You will probably create a background process, or maybe a Linux or Windows service that will actually run the process in the background for you. So however, it is useful to run IDM in this way for development or even testing purposes, so that you can see the error message in the Felix console directly. The error message will be written to a directory relative to your IDM instance. So my IDM instance is inside this directory, and you would see the log file in here. So you could see those log file is inside here. If you are looking for errors that are typically in the Felix console, however they have gone past through, you can scroll up for some reason. You can come to this IDM log file and look for the error in there. Above the servlet layer or the OSGI container sits the IDM core service. And then to access all of those IDM core services, you would use the REST API. So in fact, the IDM admin UI, the end user UI, or other client application all have to go through the REST API. Typically using HTTP or HTTPS if you want secure connection. This is just an example where an error has occurred with the connector, which we might probably facing something like this later. And this is just an example of some type of error message we may see in the Felix console. But the same error will also appear in the log file I was pointing out. As I mentioned before, we have two types of UI. One is admin UI, another one is end user UI. And now I'm going to demonstrate how do we log into the admin UI. For this case, I'm going to use the Chrome to log into the admin UI. So after you log into the admin UI, the quick start dashboard is automatically displayed when you first log in to the IDM admin UI as the administrator. The dashboard page contains most common administration items that allow you to quickly manage the IDM installation. The administrator can also manage the dashboard through the dashboard menu here. So and add some new widgets and here like this. We will look into the detail of this part later. And for the end user admin, I will use another browser, Firefox, to demonstrate, because we want to prevent having some session conflict between end user activity and administrator activity. So we strongly recommend using two different browsers, or you could use different Chrome profile to open end user port UIs or admin UIs, so that you won't have the conflict issue. So in the end user admin, you could see the function where after you log in, the first page is you say hello and saying your end user username. Then you could see the profile in the left menu. Okay, so go back to the admin UIs. We will look into the resource report. In the resource section of the dashboard it displays the list of connectors, mapping, and managed object configured within the IDM. There are for this case, I already create a few connectors and mapping before. You could see I have 3 mapping, 5 connector, and 5 managed object in this IDM. And connectors are how IDM communicate to the external resource where identity data exists. And mapping is meaning define what, how, where, and when to provision identity data from the external resource. Managed objects are the identity objects managed in IDM. For example, the user managed object is for managing user-related identities. Managed objects are stored in the local IDM repository. So you could see the 5 managed objects. You can manage other objects such as device and things by adding new managed objects in managed object section. The IDM administrator can manage the dashboard and can also manage the configuration of IDM through the configure menu option. Connectors and managed object, they are 2 main configuration options to do some basic user provisioning. So we will focus more on connector, managed object, and mapping later. The administrator can also manage the different objects that are defined in IDM from the managed menu option. This one, the one I'm now showing. For example, the administrator can manage user from the user list page. From this page, you can view, add, delete, and edit users that are stored in the IDM repository. The IDM administrator or any user added to the IDM repository can log into the IDM end user UI as long as password is set on the account, the correct authorization is set on the account, and the account is active. The user also has a dashboard page that shows notification for the user. The user can also view their profile and update their password if that is necessary. So this is the one I mentioned about updating the password. The profile page of the IDM end user UI let the end user manage their personal information connected by IDM. The page includes several tabs that supply the end user with additional information and function depending on the options enabled by the IDM administrator. For example, the IDM administrator can turn on the privacy and consent option, which will let user to have a look at this page and let user control their privacy and consent option. Each of these tab or section will be described in later for in this sharing. This line is trying to say when the user select login and log out from the IDM admin UI or end user UI. This includes internal user and managed user. So the first one, when the user select login, a post authentication question mark action equal to logout request is sent to IDM, ensure the anonymous user session is cleared. Then a get login request is sent along with the user credential to authenticate. A successful authentication results in setting a cookie on the browser for the session. The cookies is used for as long as the cookies is valid based on the setting set in IDM for the session. The second one, when the user select logout or an application access the logout URL, a post authentication question mark action equal to logout request is sent to ensure the session is terminated. The browser receives a new session JWT cookie set to null. A get login request is then sent with the anonymous user credential using the new null session JWT cookie. Okay, so let's demonstrate the login process now. If we look, we do the login now and click on the authentication action login, then we take a look at the set cookies. So the cookies been set in the response. We can properly copy this entire cookies value. And put the jwt.io debugger. So we get to see the header algorithm type, which is the first part of the JWT token. This is all encrypted anyway. So unless I can specify the correct signature and encryption, because currently it is got invalid signature, I have to go back, look up the key information from IDM to able to decrypt this. And it makes sense of the actual payload, so it is encrypted. Okay, so we just walk through the IDM administrator UIs and the end user UIs. So now we will take a look at the Postman, how do we use the Postman to do some inquiry. In this screen, you could see I used the admin role to create a Postman admin user in the IDM, because if we want to use the Postman to do the inquiry, we have to provide some information for the authorization part. Now we are now using the base auth, and it is required us to put the username Postman admin user into this input box so that we could do the inquiry by the RESTful API. So this is a short description about how do we use the Postman collection to do the inquiry.